Saint Nicholas, Sinterklaas or Nikolaas of Myra. These are all names we give to a certain person that has to do with a holiday we celebrate here in the Netherlands. Sinterklaas gives out candy and toys to the little children, and last week we celebrated this holiday here in the Netherlands. The people here in the Netherlands have a certain view on how Sinterklaas should be celebrated or how Sinterklaas should act. But who actually was this person and who is the historical Saint Nicholas? Today on Old News we're going to look at the historical person behind Sinterklaas and how he became such a celebrated figure. Hello everyone and welcome back to Old News. Today we're going to try and find out who was actually the historical Saint Nicholas and how did he transform into the celebration and holiday we now know as Sinterklaas. Let us first look at the historical Saint Nicholas. It is actually quite hard to find sources of the historical person we now know as Nikolaas of Myra. Even uncovering his burial church doesn't give us any inscriptions or other references that we can use to find out who this person was. All we know is that a certain Nicholas of Patar was a 4th century bishop in Myra at the time. What we also know is that Myra back in the day lay in a province called Lycia. And Lycia lies in modern day southwest Turkey. So we can say that the sources are sparse, but we do have another source. We lack contemporary sources, but we do have a so-called vita. These vitae were inscriptions on paper or something else that tell us the life of saints. And the vita of Saint Nicholas, the first one we do have, probably dates from around the 8th century. And it was written by a so-called Michael or Michael. And he wrote about certain general things and a few legends surrounding Saint Nicholas. Nikolaas was a citizen of Lycia, a 4th century province of the Roman Empire. Michael wrote down that he was the son of highborn parents who were actually quite wealthy. But this might be a bit exaggerated because of the position of bishops at the time who actually weren't that wealthy. We also know, or probably know, that he spoke Greek and not so many Latin because of the place where he had his education. After you learned grammar and rhetoric at school, we know that Nikolaas became an orphan quite early on in his life. And after that, we have reason to believe that the local believers and the bishops of the area had Nikolaas in mind to become a bishop as well. There are no explicit objections against his election as far as we know. As a bishop, we have quite an interesting description about Nikolaas. As a bishop, he was described as being modest, caring and serious. And according to Michael, who wrote the Vita, his essence radiated goodness and holiness. And he was so vulnerable that anyone who looked at him became a better person. But Michael also describes another side of Nikolaas. The bishop had a more hard side. He was a refuge in danger, a helper in distress, a fighter against injustice, toiled with sailors to save a ship, and scolded judges or even the emperor to rectify injustice. There are also a few of these descriptions that tell us that Nikolaas even fought against some of these judges in person to rectify injustice being done to any citizens or other persons. As a bishop, Nikolaas became quite famous for one story, where he saved 3 innocent citizens and 3 innocent generals. And he went up to the judge or even the emperor himself to prove that they were not guilty. These people were in the first place sentenced to death, but he prevented this from happening. If you want to read the entire story about St. Nicholas saving these people, I provide a link in the description below where you can see and read the story for yourself. Nicholas became quite old and eventually died on the 6th of December, somewhere halfway through the 4th century. We know that still after his death, a lot of miracles around St. Nicholas happened. For example, the moment he was buried, a certain fluid gathered in his sarcophagus that had healing powers. And so, with this and other miracles that happened around St. Nicholas, he became one of the most famous saints and holy persons in Christendom. In the centuries after the death of Nicholas, we do see that he becomes more and more important and even gets the status of saint. He even gets a day where he's honored, and that day is Thursday. Every Thursday is a day for honoring Nicholas. And we see that he becomes more important over time, and especially his feast, because during the Council of Oxford in 1222, his feast, or the feasts for honoring Saint Nicholas, gets the highest, or one of the highest liturgical statuses in the church, which means that it's one of the most important feasts of the year. Later on, in 1363, we see that Lord John of Blois gives a substantial amount of money to the students of Dordrecht and Bergen during the time of St. Nicholas' feast. We also see that from the city administration of Dordrecht that a large amount of cake and almond bread was given out to the children. And even later on, in the 16th century, we already see that people or children put their shoes close to the chimneys, and that toys and candy were being bought for them and given to the children. Social Christian character, which meant that a lot of time and money and more things were given to the elderly or the orphan children during the time of the Sinterklaas feest. But the Sinterklaas feest almost came to an end at the end of the 16th century because of the Protestant Revolution. The Protestants thought that the feast of Sinterklaas was too Catholic, and in most Protestant countries it was replaced by Christmas because, according to the Protestants, only good things and good deeds can come from God Himself. The Protestants also believed that the Sinterklaas feast was too superstitious. But in the Netherlands, however, the feast endured and got a more homely character after this. The Sinterklaas processions we know today are quite a recent development, however, and date back to the 19th century. We do, however, still see a lot of similarities between the historical Saint Nicholas and the current day Sinterklaas. For example, he always comes to help in the night or gives out presents during the night. And he's quite mild and generous, just like Saint Nicholas. There is, however, another figure which has similarities to Saint Nicholas or Sinterklaas. And that is Wodan, or Odin, the Germanic god. Or the Nordic god, depending on the pantheon. Wodan was displayed as an old man with long grey hair and a long grey beard, and was dressed in blue or red, in a blue or red mantle. We also see that Wodan rode on a horse named Sleipnir and had a spear named Gugnir. And he was worshipped during the most stormy time of the year, which corresponds with the time that we celebrate Sinterklaas or the Feast of Saint Nicholas. There are some scholars who believe that there is a connection between Wodan and Sinterklaas. But there are also scholars who say that the Feast of Sinterklaas has purely a Christian medieval background. In America, the popular celebration of Santa Claus of course has European origins. The name Claus suggests it already. The story of how St. Nicholas came to America is as follows. It is said that in 1613 a group of German and Dutch colonists were traveling or sailing to the New World. And on the prow of the ship there was a statue of Saint Nicholas, who was also the patron saint of sailors. And during one of the nights that they were sailing to the New World, Saint Nicholas appeared to one of the Dutch colonists and telling him where he should settle in the New World. The place where they settled was named New Amsterdam and eventually became New York. During the 17th century, the Puritans came to the New World and they disagreed with the celebration of the feast of Saint Nicholas. The Dutch and the German colonists, however, they kept the feast but changed it a bit. First of all, they changed the day to the 24th of December so that it was more in line with the German feast known as Weihnachten. But it was eventually Dr. Clement Clark Moore, who wrote a poem in 1822 that really gave a face to St. Nicholas in America. It had quite a few similarities, but it changed enormously. The most important thing that it was no longer had any ties with the Catholic Church. The only things that really stayed were his red, the color of his clothes, which was red, and the hat that he wore, which was a German gnome hat. And from then on, America commercialized the Feast of Santa Claus, and it became enormously popular. So now I hope that you know a little bit more about the background of the historical person or feast we know as Sinterklaas. We also like to do our research correct, so we make all the sources that we use for this video available for you in the description below. Do you like this video and would you like to see more? Then please like this video or subscribe to our channel, or maybe follow us on Facebook or Instagram. Links are in the description below. And we hope to see you next time on Old News.